Oh boy. Hello and welcome to the Nen Show Podcast. This is your host, Craftsdwarf, here with my co-host, Mathwiz, here for the second episode of Ashita no Joe. Say hello, Mathwiz.
Oof. This was a... Oof.
Yeah. Like, this is where, like, I guess I'll say it now, like, because I do enjoy the last stretch of reading, this, in spite of the scan quality and translation quality, but this is, I'd almost say this is where Joe, like, really starts for me. Because I do, like I said, I enjoy it, but it's like I just like the spike in what's going on. But anyway, before we do that, let's get into comments, which I almost forgot about I did forget about. Like, we were just about to start recording. I'm like, oh shit, comments. Luckily, there's only like 13, but we haven't done it in like 2 episodes, so I completely forgot. So the first one I'm going to respond to is by Jalacock Respawn because he brought up the history of Joe and like
Yep, that was the one I was going to bring up too.
Oh, well, shit. Okay. We have another thing you can potentially bring up, even though it's technically not a comment. But, well, mostly, like, I do think it's interesting, and I think I forgot to link the Hawks blog post that I was going to link, which, it's full of spoilers, so, but, I said I was going to link it, and I think I forgot, so maybe I'll edit into that one and then put it into this one, too, because it also brings up the time period that Joe came out, and it's interesting, though I will say that, because he says, like, oh, you guys could have talked about this, and I wouldn't say I'm quite, like, bugged when people say that kind of thing, but, like, that's what the comments are for, because we obviously can't mention everything, so, like, for as long as these episodes are, there's always going to be things we missed or things that slip our mind, or, so, like, that's what the comments are for, and this is, you brought it up. This is good, yeah. Now we have the comment. So if you want to bring up the one thing real quick, because it is unusual.
Oh, wait,
The video.
Yeah, so Shabes, Caribou-kun, he does his AniTube Digest weekly, and he, like, mentioned our podcast in it, and kind of, like, I don't know if it's something he'll continue doing. He definitely seemed like there was a lot that he couldn't say because of spoilers, but yeah,
The struggle is real.
Obviously, Ashita no Joe is, like, one of his favorites, so he appreciates that we're talking about it, and I don't know if he'll have anything more to say in the future once we get to the stuff that he couldn't talk about for spoiler reasons. But yeah, if you are,
yeah.
I mean, it's also just like an interesting little show in its own right. So I will promote Shabes here if you aren't already.
But I guess, like, if he does happen to listen to this, like, he knows the anime differences. So if he just wants to drop some, like, so if he wants to drop some, like, if he wants to leave a comment and say, here's some differences in this part of the series that you guys covered, like, that would be cool because I don't, neither of us have seen it. So we don't have that context. So that's some, like on the Soul Eater, I think we had some people commenting, because you hadn't seen it in a while. So there were some people, I think there were some people commenting on some of the differences. So, and that's something I tend to find interesting, but it's especially in this case, we don't have the context for it. So yeah, just a suggestion. And anyway, the last comment I want to respond to is, Okan Yakin, who, well, so last time I mentioned, a moment where a character, like, stopped their punch right before the bell rang, or right as the bell rang, basically. And I was referring to a very specific moment, and, like, yeah, it's a boxing series. Like, the moment I'm referring to was very specific, and it happened in this reading, and, like, it's iconic for a reason, so I just wanted to, it's exaggerated, but, like, it's based off real, because it's a sport. Like, boxing was a real thing before Joe, but it's, like, very much, like, yeah, of course, like, I don't know, it was a weird conversation, and I'm not sure if he knew the specific scene I was talking about, because I feel like if he did, then he would have realized that what I was saying was very specific, because, again, it was very specifically referenced in Hajime no Ippo. It was very specifically referenced in Megalobox, like, and when I talk about that moment, like, there's a reason it sticks with me, because it's, I mean, that whole fight is good. The fight is good in general, but that moment and one moment that happens, I think, before it, are just, it may be some of my favorite exchanges in anything ever. Like, the fight I already really like, but we'll talk about that. So yeah, not that many comments, but we're only getting started with the series, and I do think, like I said, it's hit its stride here, I think.
Yeah, this one definitely had I don't know, it was just more. It's less of like, oh, I'm waiting. It seems like it shows promise, but I'm waiting for more. This was more of like, oh, okay, we're getting some stuff here.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, we're back to, or well, I guess their tomorrow is starting. They get into the training, and like we see their just sort of general daily routine. with all the just exercise they have to do, and like just then that we get into their workplace like next, because like being a boxer, like I think they even mention it, is like they don't get a lot of money even if they're paid to win. Like they only get one match every few months, and they get paid. Yeah, they do get paid to fight, but it's not enough to live off of at their level at all. So they have to work, and that's just that's something that comes up in Hajime no Ippo too. And we get introduced to Noriko, who I wonder if like the author maybe, or the artist rather, I think Chiba, fell into sort of like a design trap with it. Like maybe he wasn't sure how to draw multiple like cute looking girls, so like he calls attention to the fact that Noriko looks a lot like Yoko, but she still looks a lot like Yoko. So I wonder if it's like because I don't like see, this is the third time I'm reading it, and I don't know if there's like anything like that majorly adds to the fact, like is added to by the fact that they look alike, really.
I had also been noticing that like there were a couple of different characters showing up who had like similar hairstyles to Joe, and I was like, I didn't know if that was supposed to be like an intentional parallel or if it was just how it happened to look.
Yeah, just right. So yeah, that's just something like Noriko, like she's as a character, she's still pretty distinct from Yoko. Like she's in a completely different like status and like relation to the main characters.
It's actually kind of funny because when they got to the club or whatever and Yoko's dancing, I was like, oh, that character looks a lot like Yoko, and then it actually was Yoko, and I'm like, oh, so that was intentional.
That's right, because every time I've seen, or at least this time and the last time, I was just like, yep, it's Yoko, because I knew she was there, because that's a big scene. But then it's like, I didn't think about that, like oh wait, that's that initial, like, that's funny. But anyway, as we see, like, I don't know, it feels like they didn't even train Joe, but he's just like immediately starts fucking up, basically. And I don't know, I don't even know if he can read. I don't even remember. Like, I think he can, but like, he's just like, he's not trained or educated, and like, yeah, he has a hard time getting into like this workplace. So I don't know, feel a little bad for him.
Yeah, I definitely see it from like the perspective of like a retail worker, where it's like, did they even train this man to like do his job? Like, how do they expect him to just know what to do? Because especially because like with the quickness with which in like one chapter it's like, oh, we're gonna get you this job, and then he's working at the job, and it doesn't show anything of like him learning it. So it's like, did you train him?
Yeah, they could have, and it just might have just washed over him, because it's like he doesn't even like we later on we see him take the protest, and he gets a written exam on boxing, and he's like, first he's like sweating bullets because he's like, oh shit, I didn't study. And then it's like, oh, it's about boxing. And then he completely fucks it up because he doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, the best defense is a good offense. And Nishi's like, are you stupid? It's so funny. But like, he just doesn't take well to anything that isn't like fighting, basically. So it's, there isn't enough care it doesn't seem like there's care given to his like education, so like of course he messes up, and it just, like I said, I just feel a little bad for him.
Wait a minute, boxing exam, written test. Oh man, I can't believe Naruto ripped off Ashita no Joe.
Oh, that's funny. I think this is also when no, that's later, but we get probably one of the last goofy translator notes, where a character is eating, and the translation writes "itzakimasu," and it's like, if you know Japanese, or if you read enough manga, you should know what this is. Which has the same energy as one of my favorite like translator notes. I think it was from One Piece, where during a fan translation of like Chopper's fight in the drum arc, and it just like romanizes one of Chopper's attacks, and it says, and the translator note says, "If you know Japanese, you should know this." This is the translation, and it's just like, but I wouldn't need to translate it if I knew Japanese. But I was also reminded because so this is so they talk about like a wordplay pun where the word jaw sounds like the pronunciation of Joe. So glass Joe, and I was like, wait a minute, that sounds familiar, and I actually looked it up, and yeah, Punch Out, they're like the first character in the video game series, like oftentimes the first character to fight is a character called Glass Joe. And he's like French, but I did notice that in some iterations he has a hairstyle that reminded me a little bit of Joe. So if it is a reference, I wouldn't be surprised. But just like because not every iteration had that hairstyle, which is part of why it caught my attention. But yeah, I haven't played Punch Out either, and like other than that, the character doesn't seem like Joe much at all. But I thought it was I read it and I was like, wait, that sounds familiar. So, but anyway, even though Joe was overall like pretty inept, after they leave, he's like, wow, this is the first time I've worked in my life. I like, if it, it feels nice. Like he's like there's a satisfying feeling too as they, crossing the bridge, so to speak, and improving in some way, or in this case, like doing something that he never would have done before when he was so like hateful towards authority, I suppose. But anyway, after they do some training, they find out that Danpei has been arrested for drinking, even though he said that he wouldn't. And as they go into the station, they find out that he wasn't allowed to get the license for his gym because of his past, which is like he's legitimately like improved himself. Like he's he did put down drinking. Like he's trying to give Joe a chance, but he's being held back by his yesterday, is how I saw it. And the boxing association is rejecting him on that basis, which Joe, of course, does not take kindly to. And also, I want to say, like, I like the expressions a lot of the time. Like, after finding out about the Danpei getting rejected, like, Joe does this sort of, like, manic laughter, and there's, like, a panel where his face is just melting. Like, it's a weird moment. And then after that, he's just got, like, this... his face has, like, a smile, like, a very soft smile on it, but still just, like, it's... I don't know. It's still drawn with this, like, he's clearly, like, disappointed, and I don't know. It's just, I just think there's a lot of good expressions in the series. I don't know. And I would also say, like, not only is, like, another thing I think that sort of gets, like, notably, like good this stretch is, like, the art has really hit its stride as well. I think, especially in some of the matches. There's a specific moment or two I'll mention later, but anyway, they can't get Danpei out because he needs a personal guarantor. Though Joe even does a threat like, well, if I can't become a boxer, maybe I'll become a crime lord. And it's like, sort of doing I remember back when the trial to send him to juvie happened, and he was even saying that, like, he can be worse if, he's pushed. And so, it's rough that, if he can't do what he wants, that he has to do something like that. But luckily that's not how it turns out.
Yeah.
But anyway, Yoko is able to get Danpei out, and they make the offer to take Danpei and Joe in at the Shiraki gym. But of course, Joe denies it because he wants to fight Rikishi, and you can't fight someone from the same gym as you. So, that's like against his goal. And I think he has a line where it's like, okay, well, if I can't cross the bridge for tomorrow, I'll build it myself. So I do really like how that line is also tied to the fact that their gym is underneath the bridge, like, because they have to cross it all the time in regards to this area of, like, self-improvement.
Yeah, I guess it's definitely interesting in how, like what direction could the story have gone in? Like, instead of, like a different manga might have done it as like, oh, I guess we have no other option but to, like, he's put into this situation where it's like, it seems like he has to take this. This is his only option to get into the world of boxing, or else he's just got nothing. And certainly the story could have gone in that direction of, like, wow, here are the hijinks of Joe and Rikishi having to, like, train together. But it didn't, instead Joe, he's Joe. He can't just, if there's no way, he'll find a way.
Yes, and yes, he does. They did remind me, because I read the first volume of Rokudenashi Blues a while ago, which is also a boxing manga, but it seems to have more on the delinquent side of things. So when I get the time to go back to it, I'm curious because, like, like, Joe very much moves away from that kind of delinquent lifestyle, even though he still very much acts like one. So I'm curious as to how Rokudenashi Blues is different. I hadn't thought about that until you said something about, like, oh, maybe how could the story have gone differently? And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, there is a brief scene where Rikishi, like, looks down on Joe and calls him an amateur, and Joe gets pissed, and, he's about to fight him, but Danpei stops him. And of course, like, Danpei even, points out that, like, yeah, Rikishi is, like, a pro now. He's way above you. So, Joe has to improve, too, to fight him. And then after Joe beats up Danpei, he does apologize, which is another brutal... I don't know, again, it's hard watching Danpei get the shit beat out of him because he's just an old guy. Like, he gets knocked down the stairs and breaks a window, and it's like, this poor old guy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's the line about Joe going to build the bridge forwards. And then we get introduced to Wolf, who is a giant piece of shit.
Yeah.
Especially for stuff that happens later. And it is kind of funny now I think about it, because Joe calls himself, he's the evil wolf, you know, and like at one point he's like, Wolf is just a mangy dog or stuff like that. But at the same time, like, Wolf is even more of a piece of shit than Joe. Like, at least Joe can't stand, like you know, like, he'll fight out of self-defense, but, you know, the kids getting, like, completely, you know, because they sneak in and Wolf beats the shit out of them. Like, that's obviously a line that you just don't cross. So it's like, and I even had this thought, well, it's like, you know, Joe can be unlikable in himself. So of course, like, his first antagonist in the pro boxing world is even more of an asshole. Wolf's definitely good, especially for the stuff that happens later. I think is interesting, but we'll get to that, of course. Anyway, we see a couple quick pro matches, you know, showing off how like much stronger Rikishi is, and hyping up Wolf, who's Joe's not his first opponent, but his first like actual full match we see. And of course, Joe instigates his plan where he eggs Wolf on and pisses him off so he could do the cross counter. And yeah, he knocks out a pro boxer and ends up like hyping up the new like. And this I thought was interesting because I was reminded of like in the earlier stretch when he was like lying to the news media to try and get attention to get donations, like from Yoko, and like it's because they're both very manipulative tactics, but like there's also a different purpose because in the earlier one, Joe was using this sort of trickery to sort of cheat his way to tomorrow. But in this case, he's like trying to forge a path. He's using the same method, but he's using it to forge a path toward tomorrow. Like this isn't his goal, or it's not. But it will help. You know, it's he's also again helping Danpei to move, like get the chance to move past his yesterday, which the Boxing Association hasn't allowed from him. So it's kind of interesting that like the manipulative tactic isn't in itself wrong, but it's still like how it like works with the theme sort of, you know, like it failed before and it's successful now. So I just thought it was like I said, interesting contrast because it's a way to like Joe hasn't changed in some ways, but like because his goal is better or you know is more positive, then he's more successful. Basically, it's neat.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting, like this moment, but also just in general, how like, especially in this stretch of chapters in particular, the way that like the media is sort of used, you know, for better and for worse, because you get Joe here creating a real spicy story, and so like he distracts from Wolf's big moment, and really, so like all of these people are talking about the guy who's not even the boxer, and then the same happens with his first protest. He fails, but he makes such a fuss that he's the story. They're not talking about anyone who passed. They're talking about the guy who fails. And I don't know. I guess I just thought that was interesting. You know, it very much plays into like the media's got to come up with some kind of story. And there's a lot of moments later where it's like, damn, why are these people even here? They're just kind of being assholes. And so I do think it's interesting, especially considering the time period when this would have come out, which is, I mean, it's not, you know, it's a pretty common thing nowadays for the media to be spun as kind of in like a negative light and manipulating stories and trying to create like a, I don't know, they go for whatever is like newsworthy, quote unquote. They go for like a big juicy story. And so when there are things that could potentially be more wholesome or whatever, they don't care about that. They're always breaking into like the gym and they're trying to like, hey, what's going on here? And they're like invading people's privacy. And but I also think it's interesting how they are, as like, you know, their class is like juxtaposed against the city that Joe lives in, where everybody is like getting money out of them, and really like it's kind of satisfying to watch because you see these people, you know, walking around and trying to like get their story and get their big scoop when obviously they're kind of like I said, they're like invading privacy and just kind of being dicks.
Yeah, see, I hadn't thought about the media as a character, but I have definitely been thinking about the district, this city area as their own character, because there's a specific moment later that I think is really good. But
yeah, like as the city people, they come in and they've got all their fancy cameras and stuff, but the kids and the townsfolk are always find a way to, you know, get money out of them because you know, it's the redistribution of wealth. It's very satisfying. But yeah, like the part where they even like take apart their cars and stuff and their cameras and sell it to like have a big party. It's like, yeah, that's It's fun and good.
Right, like, they just, like, let's go up to this gym, and then, like, within moments, their cars are just dismantled. It's like, what the fuck? It's so, yeah, it's funny, because it's just kind of over the top, and, oh, man. But anyway, and as far as, like, you know, the good story versus, like you said, more potentially more wholesome one is, like, I did think of the scene where, like, they come in, they want to interview Joe, and Nishi's like, oh, you can interview me, I've got a match coming up, and he's like, and they're like, well, that won't get any attention. He's like, yeah, I guess you're right, like,
yeah.
You know,
yeah, and especially, like, later, after the big spoilery events happen, and Joe is just kind of like this husk, and they are all about, like, oh, we're going to follow Joe into this alley, and we're going to really get our scoop. We're going to hook him up with Yoko in this club, and we're going to really see what happens.
Yeah.
And it's even though, like, they can't even just be nice people. They're always like, there's got to be some sort of
they're very snakish. No matter, even if they do something that appears nice or maybe even is nice on some level, there's still a secondary motive there. In regards to their own profession, basically.
I feel like there's something more specific I'm trying to get at, but at the moment I'm not, like, thinking of the examples. So hopefully as we get further in, it'll jump to my mind what I was trying to fully get at. But that was, like, part of it, I guess.
And another thing I like about the series is that, like, they always, like, the writer very much, Ishikawa, I think, he likes to mention, like, real-life boxers, which I think is, like, a good example of, like, having done his homework, but also just, like, and it's also interesting to hear about, like, these other sort of, like, characters in the real-life boxing world of, you know, what would have been, like, through the 20s and through the 50s, I would assume. But, you know, or maybe even earlier or later or closer to the, you know, later by later, I mean closer to the time period the manga came out. But, like, there's, specifically the moment I'm looking at right now is when they're comparing Joe to Cassius, who's known for, killer punches and wild boasting. Like, Joe's just the, you know, a fictional Japanese Cassius, you could say. And, you know, there's a bunch of other comparisons that they bring up. And it also, I guess, the idea is also to ground it, because, you know, there's some, again, points that sort of stretch the suspension of disbelief, but you know, it's a fictional story, and I've seen Wilder, so I'm like, okay, but you know, by, like I said, grounding it in some way, they make it more believable, I think, by drawing attention, like, especially with the Rikishi stuff, they compare it to another boxer, and it's like, yeah,
and it is interesting from, like, a world perspective, because, like, how often do you see like, real life events referenced in fiction? I mean, like, I'm sure it happens, but most of the time it's like, oh, these things take place in, even if they're like sort of in our world, they are, you know, like, things aren't directly referenced in such a way. Like, maybe locations are referenced, but, like, people or that sort of thing, not often. So I did think that was interesting, because, like, from my perspective, I don't know who these boxers are, so when they're being referenced, it doesn't give me any extra context. It's just like, oh, okay, there's a real life parallel here, and you can kind of maybe see some inspiration for where these ideas came from.
Yeah. Though you did remind me of, because, like, it is always funny to try and think about, because, like Hunter x Hunter is a really interesting example, because, like, you think, like, yeah, it's a fantasy story in this relatively contemporary setting, but then they have, like, Catholic, you know, like, Christianity, and you just caught up to the manga, so you might recognize the Death Note reference, which implies the existence of Shonen Jump. And so, like, there's a whole can of worms there that I don't know if I want to open up, because, like, okay, Shonen Jump exists in Hunter x Hunter. Does One Piece exist?
Well, and especially thinking, like, even the part where you had said was kind of on the nose when it does the whole thing in the Chimera Ant arc about, like, oh, humans are far worse than ants. And it's literally, like, drawing, well, maybe it's, you know, it's like drawing parallels to, like, the nuclear bomb and stuff, and literally, like, showing events, but maybe it's a more fictionalized depiction of it. Maybe it's not quite the same. I don't know.
It is a different, I guess, like, what I'm trying to say is that because when they bring in a real life thing like that, then the implication is, like, okay, you know, how much of this real life thing is there, or, like, what about the real life things that influence that thing, you know, like. So it's always just, like I said, it's a can of worms that if you look into it, there's probably some logical holes and whatever, but it doesn't matter. It's a fictional story. But yeah, like, the way that this, like, real people getting referenced isn't as quite as common, unless it's, like, almost mythicized, like Hitler. You know, like, if Hitler gets referenced or he comes up, like, he's practically mythicized at this point in a way, especially with the way he's kind of used in fiction, because he's such an important figure. Nobunaga, Oda would be another one. in Japanese, more Japanese specifically. So it's like, you know, there's stuff like that, but these are much more like obscure examples that are just being referenced. So I don't know, it's interesting to consider how like fiction will use reality in a sense. And yeah, and I guess it's interesting to talk about because like I can't think of other series that do it like quite like Joe that off the top of my head. I'm sure they exist, I just can't remember any right now. So anyway, on now that Joe has successfully got the media riled up and so that they could get Danpei his license back, or they're off to take the protest, which is like, it's mostly like a world, like I say world building, but you know, it is bringing in like the real boxing and explaining to the audience how it works, you know, or at least how it worked at this time period, which I think I like that aspect in the series. Like another series I like that does that is Space Brothers, which works with the inner workings of JAXA and NASA. And so I don't know, it's just neat to sort of, it's almost educational in a way.
Yeah.
And of course, like I said earlier, it's just funny because Joe is so stupid. And he doesn't know what he's doing. And then, yeah, we see, I think this is us seeing Nishi box for the first time, at least since Juvie. And, you know, he just takes it cautiously and he wins. And then Joe has his fight. Like, he does win, but he still isn't allowed to, like, he goes way too far. Which was him, like, he'd already given up at that point. So he's still trying to make, or what was he trying to do exactly? Hold on, I don't remember. Oh, yeah, he just admits that he got carried away trying to make up for the written test. But yeah, like you said earlier, the media took more notice of him because of that. So it's like, I guess, you know, by going deeper into his sort of like infamous reputation, he also kind of like, he shields the club for, you know, further. Like, they can't just like, because especially with his threats, like, oh, well, you know, he's just afraid that I'll beat Wolf in a professional match. So it's like, now there's this sort of like weight on keeping Danpei from getting his license that they can't just do it now. It's more complicated.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a scene with Yoko and Rikishi talking about Joe.
Good scene. Because
yes.
Yoko is there like, oh, you both are so fixated on Joe. You know, you just can't get him out of your head. And they're like, yeah, well, it seems like you're kind of doing the same thing. And she's just like, what? You?
I love that exchange because she's just like, hey, you've been paying attention to this article as much as us, Miss Yoko. And she's just like, wait, nuh-uh, I'm not a Joe fan. Like... Again, like, yeah, she's just kind of petty and, you know, sidestepping it a bit, but at the same time, like, she is also, you know, she's also fixated on Joe. I love Yoko, she's so good.
When my favorite character in the manga isn't even a fighter.
Right? That's interesting. But also Joe, or no, Rikishi, and he has a line where he like he understands Joe. Basically, I'd say he understands Joe the best because, like, he immediately figured out what he was trying to do there. He's like, yeah, he's just going to leisurely pass the level B test at his own pace. And then later in the narration's like, and then, yeah, Joe just did that. He beat it at his own pace later, as Rikishi predicted, it even says. And I definitely want to bring up something about Rikishi and Joe late. Well, of course, it's pretty hard to avoid. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so here we get the part that was mentioned earlier where the town comes in to celebrate Joe getting his license, and they got a bunch of, or no, wait, maybe the media stuff happened later. Oh, this is just them doing a regular party and then bringing fireworks and ruin everything. Oh no, they did take apart the media's cars to accomplish that. So yeah, we already talked about that a bit. Anyway, Joe and Nishi get their boxing trunks. You know, they're like, the whole community is behind them basically because like, so I guess I was gonna bring it up later, but I guess I'll bring it up now because I think it's interesting because like here you see they're very like, yeah, they're taking from people. They're, you know, they're kind of shitty in their own, not like Joe's shitty, but you know, they have their failings basically. But so what I like about how like Joe entering the boxing world, like, and everyone being able to put themselves behind him and cheer him on, is like later on, especially you see it where it's like, oh, here's an illiterate buying a newspaper for the first time because there's an article about Joe in it, or another one who's like working to buy a pair of nice pants so that he can see the match, and you know,
or people quitting drinking to save up money for the thing.
Yes, that was it. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, so not only is Joe improving himself as a person, but because of Joe, everyone else is improving themselves to help support him, basically. So like, Joe's not only going for his own tomorrow, but he's helping other people find a route to tomorrow, even if it's just through him, like vicariously. And so I really like that aspect of the series about, because like Nishi, like he was just a scummy delinquent, and now look at him, he's a pro boxer, like he's he's made something of himself, you know, and
it's really interesting with Nishi in particular because when he gets some of his lines later where he kind of bites back at Joe a little bit, you kind of see like he's almost become a totally different person even before, like, you know, in the prison he was like, oh, I'm the big head honcho of this prison thing. And then he gets beaten up by Joe and he becomes a wimp. But so then when he kind of stands up to Joe a bit, you kind of see a little bit like a reminiscence of that, you know, his original personality when he was a little more of like cocky and stuff. And it's interesting because he does feel like such a totally different person from who he was before.
But it's earned now because he's done it. Like, he's not like ordering other people around. He's become strong on his own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess like I want to bring up probably my own, like one of my gripes with probably my only gripe with the series. Like, you know, the beginning could like, well, the scan isn't really a gripe for the series. That's like a gripe for the people who like, thank you for allowing me to read the series, but also like the translation and some of the scans just like there was the one page I sent you that was just like really messed up. There's like another bottom was like the raws were like just like this. If someone has the fixed page, please send it to us. Very unfortunate. But I will say, so like, because like Joe and Nishi's designs change a lot throughout the series.
Yeah.
And it's not even a major gripe. It's just, I just find it really weird that the kids who follow them around, they look the same in volume 20 as they do in volume 1.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I was like, did they ever like change?
No,
especially thinking of how time sort of is portrayed in this manga, where months, years can kind of pass without even like it being commented on. Really, it's just like, oh, this character changed. So some time had to have passed for all of this to happen. But it's So it's like, do the kids age? Do they grow up at all?
In volume 20, they look basically the same. And that's my gripe with the series, because I just find it weird that like everyone else matures and ages and grows more than the children and adolescents who should age and change the most. And it's like it's minor. It kind of doesn't matter a lot, but I can't say it doesn't. But like, because I notice it, and then I'm like, well, why didn't they change and grow up a little bit? Like, it's just weird to me that, and I guess it's like, I don't know, is it because they're more like comedic relief? Like, I don't want to say mascots because they're not really like marketable, but there's definitely like that kind of aspect to them. And so like that's because, you know, they're whenever the comedy stuff happens, they're usually doing something dumb, you know. So
yeah, especially if you would think with the whole idea of the town like bettering themselves and like changing, you would think that like the kids kind of growing up, even if it's not like, oh, and you're all grown up now, but, you know, like having like a degree of would kind of like really also give kind of like a tugging at the heartstrings moment, because it's like,
that it definitely could have been something. And like, you know, like, what is there tomorrow as like the youngest people in this community, where, you know, if nothing happened, they might have been just deadbeats. But now with Joe, like, they, you know, maybe they'll be inspired to do something more and be more than their circumstances. And, you know, like, there definitely could have been something really good there. But it is kind of weird that nothing, you know, like I said, they basically, like, I think, I'm not going to say nothing happens with them at all, like, even some stuff, but it's like, at least design-wise, they don't change. And that, like I said, I just think it's weird. So, very sad. Anyway, there's another scene of Joe at his job, working, ruining everything again, and then he just straight up like stops to go watch Rikishi box.
And of course Noriko's like, oh no, it's fine, I did his work, so it's fine.
Oh yeah, that's right. There was also the scene earlier, which is, I guess it's the earliest scene I've seen, where like he goes to change and like she sees it and she's like blushes and she's like, no, go away, it was
kind of the other way around, because like first it starts where the store owner is like, oh, look at your arms, look at your face. And then he's like, he like pulls up his shirt, like, let me check your abs or whatever. Yes. And she like blushes. And then later there's the moment where like, I don't know, she goes off to change. And then it's when he's going to see the boxing thing. And he's like, Rikishi's boxing, what channel or whatever. Like, where's the TV? Or, you know, he's like trying to get that. And she's like, hey,
that's
hello.
Right. Okay, yeah, I was yeah, it's, I just thought it was funny. Because that's like, it's like the classic joke, but then it's also like, it's the trope is this old at least. It's
yeah, like... I guess it's also kind of interesting in the way that it's handled, because it's not, whereas nowadays, you know, it's not like we see like I don't know, it's not like a fan service scene while also being like the moment. It's just like, she's clearly got like a dress on or something, and so there's like nothing shown for it. That's to be like, oh, anime's gone downhill. It's all over. It all ended with Ashita no Joe. But I don't know. It's just
I can't believe this alleged masterpiece would stoop to having such a childish trope. I don't know.
I guess that's more of just also me thinking from like the more like old-timey perspective is like, you see like a slight bit of, I don't know, like I don't
maybe
know.
That is more lewd than or relatively speaking, like, because I've heard Japan is like relatively conservative, and this would have been at the start of manga, so yeah, I don't, considering like art looked like again, like the normal style was like this was relatively experimental for the time, and then you have like Tezuka as like another really big manga, so like very cartoony stuff, so the sexuality is likely going to be in like more like real people porn, as I don't know how else to say it, like it's just, that's right, because I'm just so used to like I'm in the 2D, like I don't even touch it, I'm 2D only, but it's, so I was just like, oh yeah, real people porn, that exists. So yeah, I guess the whole like the sexuality of 2D characters and stuff hadn't quite happened yet, so because Yoko's even mentioned as being like beautiful, but she doesn't look like attractive in a sense. She still looks like a cartoon character, basically, is what I mean, if that makes sense. Like, yeah. So anyway, they do their training, and we start getting to, well, Nishi's given extra clothes so he can lose more weight and sweat out more weight, which is I think I mentioned it before, but like the hardest things about the boxing series, at least for me, is the injuries and the weight loss, and we really see that with Rikishi.
It's definitely something I was familiar with before, because I've heard of like people spending like days in a sauna before a boxing match to make weight or whatever, or like it's a thing that definitely still happens. It's, I don't know anything about boxing, but it's something I've heard of before, and I don't know anything about boxing, so it's like prevalent enough.
I know if weight class is still a thing, then weight management is going to be a thing on some level. So and this is very much like that.
I also do think it's. Oh, sorry, I'm cutting you off.
No, I was just gonna say it's hard to. It's rough. Well, especially because like I'm sipping water right now, but that's like a luxury that someone who doesn't want to gain weight doesn't have, because like water weight is that's a lot of weight.
That's,
so it's like. Or even like Rikishi eating one, like there's a scene where he's like, he just takes will suffice, and he takes one apple and he eats the stem, he eats the core, he eats the seeds, he eats every morsel of that fucking apple.
Now was it an apple? Because I know later they said he survives off one tomato, so I don't know if that's what it was.
Like, in that scene at the table, it looked like an apple to me, because it had like a stem on it. So
yeah, that's what I thought it was too. But then they did say a tomato later, so I was like, what is it?
Like that's his normal diet is tomatoes, but in that scene, I guess like, well, tomatoes not going to be sitting on a table in a fruit basket, so it's like it was a concession made for that scene, for like because he just takes it off the table and just eats it right there.
But yeah, he goes to town, and it's like, oh, and
it's so like it's just like, because it's they a boxer has to give up this thing for their sport, and this common thing that we take for granted, in a sense, like, because I'm not gonna starve myself for a few days just because I'm not an athlete, but so it's just like seeing it, like I said, it's just rough to see.
I also think it's definitely I don't know if it's necessarily even a thing to praise about it, but it's something that I thought was kind of interesting. It doesn't ever come off as, especially with like Nishi, it doesn't ever come off as like fat shaming. Like it seemed, because it's more of like a sports thing. And you definitely see in the case of like Rikishi, there's a degree to which it can go too far. And it's like, especially in like how boxing has been portrayed, where there's a lot of sacrifice and it's a lot of, it makes sense that like, or I don't know, to me, it comes off as like, I don't know. I certainly don't like look down on Nishi for not being able to make his weight, because he's literally like starving himself and like wearing all these heavy clothes and stuff. Like it seems like it's a lot of sacrifice, and it's like understandable that not everybody would be able to make that. And especially when you see that juxtaposed with Rikishi, where it's very much portrayed in kind of like a negative light, but it's also how boxing be, and it's like how much, like how determined he is to make this thing happen. So it's like negative, like I don't want to say it's all negative, but it definitely has like that edge to it where it's, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but it's definitely like it makes you,
it shows
it
multiple
hurts.
sides. Well, yeah, like you said, well, because even with like Nishi, like when Joe bitches at him for failing, like he's not even necessarily like. Is this point is more like because he's trying to do two things at once. He's trying to lose weight but also he's not like he's
he's not fully committing to it. So like his will isn't strong enough.
Right. So it's like if you can't do it, just give up or just commit to being a heavyweight, even though you're never gonna find matches. Like and it's but it's also through that and that he does eventually find the willpower to slim down. But it's like it's rough in its own way. So anyway, we get the Joe's first match, I think. Everyone's just there to watch like Wolf and Rikishi and Yoko. And this is where Joe starts to make a name for himself with his incredibly deadly cross counter. Which I forget if I mentioned this before, but I really like the cross counter being Joe's signature move because he's a character who he is the product of his circumstances. And the cross counter is like it's almost like his way of fighting back against the world.
Yeah, it's not really him like initiating the attack or the conflict or whatever. It's just him responding to it, and
exactly. So it's a very Joe way to fight, and it is very perfect, right? And then so I guess it makes sense that Wolf would be the first one to use like the counter cross counter. Or whatever, it gets a little ridiculous.
Double cross counter, triple cross counter, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times.
Yeah, they're fucking full multipliers. Like they were talking about Super Saiyan forms, like.
And I just picture like it happening in a boxing match where it's two people just like just like swatting the punches away, and I don't know. It's easy to think of it in like a funny sense like that.
Yeah. But because Wolf is someone who very much doesn't like Joe, so he's coming up with a specific way. Like, he comes up with the counter cross counter, but he also just like really doesn't like Joe because he's suffered for Joe being Joe. So then we'll talk about Rikishi later. And you might not have noticed, but we get some foreshadowing where they're doing more training, and Nishi's talking about how like he's not losing that much weight. And Danpei's like, well, I guess you're the type to gain weight easily, so you'll have to eat even less food. And because like Nishi's already like sneaking away for ramen at this point, basically, because he's not losing the weight because he's still eating. So or whatever, was it ramen or what is? I think it was ramen, but
it was noodles.
Noodles, so, sure.
Yeah. I think it was specifically. Right, if we're really sweating the details, it might have been like udon.
That's what he had noodles sticking out of his nose.
But ramen noodles, udon, they're similar enough.
And then some like not ramen nerd is gonna be like, "How dare you!" in our comment section, just like, "I'm sorry, we didn't respect the ramen and udon difference enough. I never even had udon."
We call ourselves Naruto fans.
Naruto's gonna be in our comment section like, "How dare you say that udon and ramen are just the same? Like, believe it. They're different." Okay, I'm sorry. But anyway, Joe, like I said, Joe continues to make a name for himself with his cross counter. Wolf has complete confidence, or they meet each other before their match, and they come up with the promise like whoever wins the match will get to 8-round boxing and advanced. Well, the other will still be a 6-round. And like I do think, because I think during that first match that we saw more at length, like Wolf was more like worried and agitated about Joe, but now he's like confident, and Danpei's like, oh shit. I think he has something in mind. So then we're back into the build up to the next match, and now we get to with the hype around Joe versus Wolf. We get to see the community improving to support Joe, as I mentioned earlier. The kids who want to help sneak into Wolf's gym, trying to spy on.
Why? Why?
They're just trying to help, but then they get caught, and Wolf's like.
Yeah, I'm a professional boxer. I'm gonna beat up these kids.
Piece of shit. Of course we would fall in with fucking like gangsters and criminals afterwards because he's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And he even like delivers them to the gym in his car. Like, here you go. Like,
that's not, like, why. Trash. That's wow.
And of course this was after Joe and they're doing a strategy meeting, and Joe's anxious because Wolf is confident and like Danpei's regretting like, oh, maybe I should have let you train at the other gym, and you know maybe my methods are not helping or they're not good enough. And like Joe even like there's even parts where Joe recognizes him like, well, if I didn't think you could train me, then I wouldn't be here. Like, because yeah, as we know, Joe is very like resistant to authority, but he even back in like when he was being questioned by police and you know, what do you think of when you think of kindness? Oh, Danpei Tange. Like he thinks very like he's probably the one authority figure he respects the most. You know, for as much as like as shitty as he is to him, there's still a level of respect there that he doesn't give anyone else. So, but yeah, as they train, they get interrupted by Wolf, who's a piece of shit. And of course, this does come to bite Wolf in the ass later. But we'll talk about that after the fight. And then we get, I think this is the first like elongated match I think we really get. Like not maybe Juvie has a couple, but this is at least the first like big pro match. So, Joe versus Wolf. So I guess what did you think about Joe versus Wolf? If you had any specific thoughts.
I mean, nothing's jumping to my mind instantly. Right, it was a fight. It was a fun fight, but it was a fight.
But it had themes, Mathwiz. I'll talk about the themes. No, I always do. But anyway, so like a couple things, like I mentioned the art earlier, and like when the fighting starts and Joe starts showing blows, like I don't know, I like the impacts on the flow of the panels and pages. Like this is where I was like, yeah, the art's good, you know, like because especially we haven't like I don't imagine you've had this problem, but I have heard of this happening at least in other parts of like the community where like just generally like old manga is stigmatized because the art looks old or something like that. Like the Hawks blog post I talk about that he mentions that and talks that's where I have the points about like how you know this is more. It doesn't quite look like other manga from the same time period, and generally speaking, like yeah, I think the art style is good, you know. So and especially now when he's like I said, he's finally found a stride with it. But anyway, Joe wails on Wolf until like because like one thing that was mentioned is like Wolf was kind of intimidated by all the wounds on Joe, Danpei, and Nishi, and like that, and that kind of comes up with They bring it up at the end of the fight too, where how like they were able to come up with a counter to Wolf's strategy, and because they figured out what he did because they were able to examine the wounds on the kids and recognize what he'd done. Or what did I write about that? So basically, yeah, Wolf just kind of gets like you know, he beats himself in a sense because of like the violent acts he committed outside of the ring against you know kids who were doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, but you know. With a very unfair response, like that ended up being his undoing because Joe was able to figure out what he did and came up with he got hit by the cross counter or the counter to the cross counter a couple of times, but like he said to figure out the rhythm, and then he came up with his own counter cross counter, and after the fight or at the end of the fight, Rikishi's like getting pumped. He's like, oh, he's the real thing. Like he's you know Joe. You know, he's not just some amateur like he said earlier when he came to the gym. Like Joe's proved himself by beating, you know, Wolf in a professional match and showing that like, you know, he's capable, and that which drives Rikishi into his the build up to the next match. Oh yeah, and another thing about the Wolf match I forgot to mention is like I like how when Joe comes out he's very calm and collected. Like normally he's very showboaty and loud.
Yeah.
But this time, like he was taking it much more seriously than he usually does, and I think he also because he had like a strategy. Like normally when he's showboaty and loud, it's because he has nothing, so he's like hyping himself up to put more weight on his shoulders. But this time, like he didn't need to do that because like he had a plan, and so it's a marked difference than how he usually fights.
Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, Rikishi's starting his weight loss, and Yoko's kind of arguing against it because she doesn't like it's hard on him, and she doesn't like seeing him basically waste away. And like there's even it's though we do find out like Rikishi's reason for wanting to do it, because like you know he wants to be the best boxer in the world, he wants to be rich and famous, he wants everyone to know his name, but like he doesn't feel like he can be the world champion unless he defeats Joe, because you know Joe was the one person who you know fought him evenly at the juvie, even though he's like this complete amateur and Rikishi was a pro. Like, I don't even know if they were in the same weight classes back in juvie, but, like, he can't confidently, even if he becomes world champ, like, if he hasn't beaten Joe, he's not really the champ, so that's why he has to beat him, basically.
Yeah.
For that sort of pride.
Yeah, it's definitely I don't know. It's very shonen kind of mentality there. It definitely reminds me of like Naruto saying like I can't become Hokage if I can't even save one friend. So yeah, I mean it's very Rikishi's good.
No, there's it's a good rivalry, and especially like I said, he was on the cover for Volume 1, even though he appears in Volume 2, and like he's like, because I guess maybe it's a minor spoiler, but like Rikishi, like this is so impactful to not just like what happens to Joe afterwards. Like the cliffhanger we end off with is like that Joe still has trauma from the Rikishi fight, and it basically carries through most of the manga. Like Rikishi is constantly the shadow over Joe, so it's like it's just really interesting. Like this character isn't even in half the manga, but his presence carries throughout, which I think is real. Like Ricky, he's power. He's got a presence and power to him, even though it's Rikishi.
Yeah, really, because I even said in the last part that before Joe had encountered Rikishi, he didn't really have anything like motivating him, and then he had that fight with Rikishi, and then it's like, well, okay, it makes sense to like hold off on their rematch, because if it were to happen now, where does Joe go from here? Like what's his next motivation? And so this arc, or this stretch of chapters, is all about, he gets that motivation, but then it's like, okay, he had that rematch with Rikishi, and now it's like, where does he go from here? And like the end of this stretch of chapters is very much like, where does Joe go from here? Like Rikishi has that big of an influence.
Yes. And well, it also there's some lines during Juvia where Joe's like, "I'll kill you, Rikishi," and like looking back, those lines are kind of like, yeah, they're kind of, oh no. But anyway, like I do like the timing with Joe, because Joe's handling the weight loss no problem because he's already small as it is, but seeing Nishi failing at around the same time that Rikishi is succeeding really well. In a way that's just like to the point that it's hard to watch. It's just good juxtaposition.
In a sense, he is succeeding. He's cutting the weight down, but at the same time, it's like, man, you want to. I'm not real big on like horror stuff. It just doesn't particularly vibe with me. I tend to be paranoid enough as is. But like this is a real horror story right here. A guy like cutting his weight down, starving, not just starving himself, but like not even drinking water. While
still being very doing a lot of physical exertion and exercise.
Yeah,
because he's not just losing weight. He's also adapting his body to function at low weight levels, and it's like it.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between when he has that one fight where he looks terrible, and it's like it's even described as like his body has adjusted to hell. Which is like, no.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then because later when he fights Joe, he's more adjusted to that hell, and it's just like, oh god. Okay, yeah. Now we get the scene where, like I said, Nishi, he sneaks away to get noodles. And, oh yeah, it is udon. You're right. My transgression is real against the udon fans by calling it ramen. But yeah, Joe. Yeah, he bitches at Nishi for failing, and he says that well, Rikishi's going through worse, so he can easily handle it because the world that Rikishi's living in is even harder, and so yeah. But yeah, Nishi is definitely down in this moment, but he bounces back, and he's he looks so thin in the later on, but he's not gaunt like Rikishi. He just looks like a refined huge man.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, and then we get that first match with Rikishi, who's this is where I think the art style really helps it, because obviously if it was more cartoony like some contemporaries, like the rib cage especially, where you see the ribs against his and the wrinkles on his it's just brutally it looks real in a sense that the level you even pointed out last time, we don't see nipples in anime that often these days, even with the more relatively realistic proportions and stuff. But here you have just this level of detail. I'm looking at you see the bones and muscles on his knees, and it's
it's
it's it's rough.
There's the one panel in particular after the fight where he's just like standing over Joe, and I'm like, man, this guy looks like he looks like a dead man walking, and it's like,
oh no, when he beats Joe and he's just like standing over him, like that's some striking imagery.
Yeah.
The one I'm thinking of is right here when like he's about to do his that first match against the.
That too, definitely. But it's just kind of giving another example for like how.
Yes, no, absolutely. How the art style, how the art really helps the mood of things, right?
Yeah.
And really sell Rikishi's like struggle, like because I think we've talked about it regarding like because your point was about like the Dragon Ball dissection and the difference between like an abstract pain that we can't really relate to and one that we can. And this, like, the idea of starving oneself, because we've all been at least, like, a little hungry, you know, like, where we want to eat, maybe we just waited long for dinner, so just trying to imagine the extent of that, the starvation, is, like, you know, again, it's something everyone can connect to, and...
to do that, and then also be physically exerting yourself, like, where do you get that energy from if you're not eating? Your life essence, basically. Yeah. Karapika ain't got shit on this.
But anyway, Rikishi wins his fight. Like, we find out about his like uppercut style.
Yeah, it's really interesting that he, in a sense, it almost seems like he's handicapping himself. But it's like that's because he's only throwing uppercuts. But it's like no, he's just that determined to make sure that the uppercuts work. That he's fighting this nobody, like this no name. Well, he's like this really like lower ranked. He's a veteran, but he's like a lower ranked person. Nobody else is really willing to fight him. And he's getting beaten up by this guy because he is fighting in such a hyper-specific way for the sake of preparing for Joe, it was really interesting.
Yeah, and they even like mention how like, oh, can he only throw this kind of punch because his body's in this state? And then he wins the fight by like throwing jabs and straights and immediately like wins. So yeah, like you said, it's because he specifically developed this style to fight against Joe. Like it's not like he just can't throw jabs and straights. No, he can. He just doesn't need to, for the most part. Like Joe even tries to like don't think a childish trick like because he was just surprised because he kept expecting to throw uppercuts, and Danpei's like no, like this is just the beginning of his strategy. He definitely has more planned for you, and it's like oh boy, Joe versus Rikishi. I think it's like there are tons of great fights later, or at least there's definitely great fights later, but this is probably my favorite fight in the manga, and it's because it's just intense, and I'll bring up a couple of specific moments as we get to them. Well, I've been looking forward to talking about this one, like because I've been thought about it. I was like maybe I should convince Mathwiz to pick something else because I kind of just reread this like a year or two ago, but it's like. But no, I really want to talk about Joe at a length because it's a good manga. And like when we last talked about it, or when because I did a podcast, it's on the BSA, which we took down all the videos for reasons. But there was a podcast where me and What did on Joe, but it was like it was on all 20 volumes, and it was like an hour longer discussion. Because the structure we do for the Nen Show is very different.
Yeah.
So I was like, I get to talk about Joe this way, so I'm gonna, let's talk about Joe. So anyway, Danpei tries to help Joe come up with his counter strategy, which to get Joe good at dodging uppercuts, Nishi and Danpei are both coming in with uppercuts, and there's this particular like the way things the way the news media is sort of uses perspective, like first we see Rikishi being a crazy person and going all in for this fight, and then they go over to see Joe and Nishi, and like they're beating the shit out of him. Like these, like it was like kind of like you're saying, like boxing is like they don't necessarily portray it positively. Like we very much see how like these guys are sacrificing a lot to throw themselves into literally just this one match.
It's definitely not all bad from the the way the media is handled, because in some ways to me, it comes off as like, wow, they're really, to me, I definitely read it as like sometimes it's like a critique of the way the media can be kind of sensationalist sometimes. But there are definitely times where they're just kind of like the outsiders. I guess they're the outsiders all the time.
But in this case, they're used as the outside perspective.
Yeah, to kind of just show like, wow, these two they're really going this far just for a single match. And so it definitely kind of gives that more like grounded perspective of like this is what it, we do also get to see like Joe and Rikishi's perspective of like, these are the reasons they're doing this, but it's also like when you stop and think about it, it's like, damn, they're really killing themselves out there for this match.
Right, because one thing that I do think about with the series is that like it's all about going towards tomorrow, but the way they very much risk themselves to the point of like having this bad health for that tomorrow at the same time. But at the same time, like they're driven, like Rikishi can't, if he can't fight Joe, he almost might as well not even be a boxer because he won't live up to the boxer he wants to be. And Joe's like, Rikishi is his whole goal right now.
Yeah.
So
I definitely I think it's this stretch of chapters really kind of started to sink it in that like for what boxing is for these people, it's definitely a lot of giving oneself to the fights that they partake in, and like boxing is like a way of life. Like it's not just like a sport. It's like you have to make all these sacrifices and have this mentality and this, that, and everything else.
Yeah.
And to me, it kind of comes off as like, for someone like Joe specifically, before boxing, he didn't really have a life to live, really. He was kind of just this delinquent. He was roaming around, not really doing anything. And then, he finds boxing, and the same for the prisoners as well. Like, boxing gives these people purpose. But at the same time, it always feels like, with the beatings Joe takes and this, that, and everything else, like he's really just kind of, in a sense, like he's also still throwing his life away. But it's completely recontextualized. It's why I kind of see it as like, Joe never really had like a life to begin with. So even if he is making all these sacrifices for boxing, and the same for Rikishi as well, like doing all these things that are detrimental to like a long-term, like extended health lifetime thing. It's like, I don't know, it's like it's something, I don't know, like it's taking in a way, it's like sacrificing his life for something, and it gives him a purpose. So it's I don't know, even if it has like the dangers to it and it has like the negative drawbacks, it's also still better than the alternative. It's like, oh, why don't these people step away from boxing? For someone like Wolf Kanaguchi, he has like a different sort of spin on things. But like for the people like Joe and Rikishi who do go this far, it's kind of like they don't have anything else. So it's, they give their everything for boxing because it's really the only thing that they have, I guess.
Yeah, because I'll definitely say that like I do the series very much like, it celebrates boxing and ultimately sees that as positive, but it also does not shy away from the negative at all.
Exactly.
To the point of making it seem really as brutal and harsh as it is. Like with the fact that Rikishi, like this major character dies in not in the ring, but because of what happened in that ring. It's like, there's no, like, it doesn't, it like I said, it celebrates it, and it's ultimately positive towards it, but it doesn't like glorify it necessarily, or or do a what's the word? Maybe glorify is the word, where it's not like shying away from the darkness of the sport. Basically.
Yeah, there definitely are some, I don't know if critique isn't the word I'm looking for, but there are definitely things that, especially like nowadays, which, information on like head trauma and whatnot would not have been as widely known back in like the 60s and 70s. But I definitely think of it now. And like, for me, as someone who doesn't watch boxing, who doesn't really have an interest in boxing, I think of that and I'm like, why would, I don't know, I don't see the appeal. But then I read something like this and, I at least like kind of get it, at least from like the perspective of what this fictional story is trying to tell. It's not like I'm going to go out and watch real boxing now, but it's like reading it from this story, I understand kind of what it's doing. I feel like there's more I wanted to say there, and I'm not getting it.
And I'm actually, because I would imagine that, like, especially because of like the head trauma thing, like, because I know wrestling is something you are into, and my experience with wrestling is the Dark Side of the Ring documentary, where especially in the two-parter opening for season 2 on Chris Benoit, it's a person who did some horrible things because of for one, grief involving the loss of a friend, 2, steroid abuse, and 3, head trauma from wrestling, from taking chairs to the face, from hitting, they were even talking about how, like, back in when he was active, it wasn't as widely known as it is now, and that was only in like what I think he died in, or he committed the murder suicide in like 2008, and he'd been wrestling through 90s at like the earliest or latest, or no wait. In that like relatively recently is compared to this series. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so, and even nowadays, like you said that happened like 12 or 13 years ago. It's still like a touchy subject in the wrestling community. Even now, like whatever perspective people take on it, there's like so many different things to consider about it, and it's just like there's definitely the degree to which. Well, never mind. I'm kind of getting a little off track. But yeah, like it is. A situation, it's very, I don't know. So yeah, bringing that perspective kind of coming into this, it's certainly interesting.
Yeah, because now that you mention it, like I'm curious about how, because like the goal of boxing is kind of to hit your opponent in the head, because that's the fastest way to knock them out. Compared, like I wonder if maybe, because I feel like I hear more about MMA nowadays, and a sport that's also brutal in its own way, but it's also not quite as dedicated to hitting the head as much, because it's mixed martial arts. Like there's more grappling and and I've seen some injuries that don't look good, so maybe I'm completely off base, but it's, I don't know, I'm curious as to how, like, yeah, because the injuries are like I don't know, it's rough. So on some level you want the fighters to be like safe, but I
guess
I don't know.
To thinking about how this sort of, to make like the parallel, if we did bring up Benoit to kind of like compare that to like Rikishi here. He very clearly had more that he wanted to do. Like his fight with Joe, it was something he had to get past, but he still had more goals. So like, I don't know if I necessarily go so far as to say, well, like from Benoit's perspective, with what the head trauma kind of led to, there's a degree to which his actions kind of have tarnished his legacy for a lot of people, or at least some people. Like as a whatever sort of sport you're in, focusing on this stuff, it allows you to, like, even when you're gone, you have like this legacy of like, this is the thing, you can be remembered by the things you contributed to, in this case, like the boxing world or the wrestling world or whatever have you. And like, you can be remembered for those accomplishments. But when the dark side of that is that, with stuff like head trauma and whatever, it can turn you into a totally different person. And unfortunately, like, that's some of the not shying away from like the negatives of the business, is that it can lead you to do things if you're not careful about how you conduct or if you're not careful about like what you do in your sport, or even in some cases it's outside of people's control. And it's the same for like NFL players and stuff. People get head trauma, and I forget exactly what the term is, but like, I don't know, it does stuff with your brain. And there's, it can lead people to do things that will tarnish their legacy. So it's definitely like a double-edged sword for some of these things that are very physical. But that's just kind of like the sacrifice people make, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is like, like on one hand, like, should we abolish things entirely? That's probably not going to happen. But at the same time, like we generally speaking, we want people to be safe. So, like, and
there's also a degree to which, people going through these things and like the negative things happening, it does shed light on, like the Benoit stuff definitely opened up a lot of discussion into head trauma and concussions and stuff. And there are a lot more safeties being taken. He's not the only example, but like, there are
that was
other cases.
Well, that was a very high profile, because I vaguely remember hearing about that when it happened, or sometime like within, like, and I'm nowhere near the wrestling world. Like, it was a big deal. Like,
yeah, and that's, again, we talked back, I brought up like the media earlier. There's definitely a degree to which, if you've never heard of wrestling, but here's a sensationalist story that people can latch onto, and the media will be quick to spin that out. But sorry, now we're getting a little off track.
We're kind of we're way off topic. Though I think it's still important to cover, because like I have even seen people like call Joe's about toxic masculinity, and I find it hard to deny that in some regard. Like, I don't think it hurts the story for me at all. But if that's something that you personally don't really don't like, then you're probably not gonna like Joe. And or because like you could read the like, especially when like the gender is commented on, especially with Yoko, who you're a woman
Yoko
in this man's
definitely
world.
calls that out, talking about like, I don't understand why you're making all these sacrifices for the sake of your determination or the sake of your goals or whatever. It's like, because when it has that much of like a negative drawback, and we see where that leads Rikishi, so there's definitely like it's not brushed aside. It's definitely factored in.
I wouldn't say it like, again, it doesn't demonize that aspect, but it doesn't glorify it either, I don't think.
Exactly.
I'm able to enjoy it, basically. Even if like, again, like on some level, I don't want people being hurt like this, but at the same time, it's like, well, if they literally can't, like, I don't know. It's like I said, it's such a subject, and we've talked about it for a little bit, so maybe we should move on. But I did think that was an interesting discussion, even if it was only tangentially related.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Now we get another one of those iconic scenes that this might be my favorite Joe reference I've seen in something else. But I'll describe the scene first, because where this is Rikishi, he breaks out of his like room that he let himself be locked into, so that he could and then he goes into the bathroom because he wants water, and Yoko has water prepared for him, like, and she even mentions
even before that, like, he runs to the sinks and they're all like tied off, and he goes to the showers and they're all tied off, and and it's also from the like, knowing that Yoko was against this from the beginning, the fact that she would then go so far because she she has her own kind of dedication to Rikishi, and so like, she cares about him and she is willing to kind of go against her own ideals. She opposes this, but she kind of caves in, and in this case, like, she does help, what he's going for, because that's what he wants, and so she supports that, and that, she has some conflicts with that after the fact, some survivor guilt, definitely, because she's like, oh, I could have prevented this, but like, in the moment, she's willing to compromise on her beliefs for the sake of Rikishi, and it's a really powerful moment, and it's sad.
Like the way she's like, please drink this water and give up. I won't be disappointed in you. In fact, I'll be glad that you're just a human like the rest of us. You're a flawed person. And then it's because of your tears that I was able to, because he just pours out the water, and like her helping him gives him the resolve to not like to keep going down his path that it ends up killing him. And it's brutal, especially like in retrospect, because you going through like, well, did you know Rikishi was going to die? Was that a thing you were spoiled on?
I did not know that spoiler.
Ooh, so okay, you get to talk about your reactions to that if you had a particular reaction, because I don't think I knew that going through the first time. Like I might have, because Rikishi is one of those characters. The only one I'm going to mention, because the other two are spoilers because you haven't touched the thing. But apparently Ace from One Piece has also, like, like in Japan they'll give funerals, like fandoms will give funerals, like go to real life funerals for fictional characters.
Oh wow!
And Rikishi is one of those characters who got one like decades ago. It might have been more because of the anime than the manga. I don't remember, but so that would have been like people who are already fans of the manga watching the anime, and then so like I'd be really curious to hear more about these, because I know they exist, but I don't know about like how much of it is in kind of like like because it's a fan base thing. It's regarding to this fictional story of these, like, so I don't know. I'm curious about learning more about it, but I've heard of these things. Like this is at least I've heard of 4 that I can think of off the top of my head. And I haven't verified all of them, obviously, but it's an interesting part of the like I only hear about the Japanese fandom. But Rikishi's death was it was big in a sense to the people who were following this story, and that's one of the reasons I know that.
Yeah, and this is just a really haunting scene, kind of in general, because you have Rikishi, who up to this point very suave, very composed, very much in control of what's going on. And he's so powerful, and then you see him reduced to running around this facility looking for water, begging for water, defying his own
his own goal.
His own restrictions that he had set on himself for his goal. So kind of finally caving in and compromising on that, and
and it ends up like proving his resolve when he's literally handed everything he wants at the time he's most desperate, but then it's he's still able to hold on to his resolve in the end, even if it, because of Yoko.
Yeah.
It's again one of those scenes that just sticks with you, I think. Though I will say, there's also, like, for me, so the show Majipoka, I didn't like the show overall, but my favorite joke from it was a reference to this scene, because I'm just going to describe it real quick because it is funny. Because, like, it's one of my favorite reference comedy bits in anything, because it's like the way basically what happens is the character who's a vampire is, like, not drinking blood, or I think she also likes tomato juice because it's red, which is another common thing with vampires. And then she's like, one of her friends is like, here, drink this, and she's like, oh, because of she does the Rikishi thing, and because of your tears, and then she pours it on the ground, and it snuck up on me because the build up to it was so organic that I didn't see it as a Joe reference until she, like, poured it on the ground and did the very, like, so it caught me really off guard, and then there was, like, a following punchline that made it even funnier. So like, it's my favorite reference comedy in something because it's not just, like, referencing the thing, but it's using it really organically. Like, it's fitting what's going on, like, perfectly, and then it, like, adds its own punchline to the end. So it was the best joke in the show by far, honestly. And yeah, I just wanted to. I seem to be on this, like, my arc this Nen Show is me bringing up all the Joe references I know about, because I do want to highlight how, like, this is a really important and iconic series in Japan, and not everyone who's like, like, a lot of people, especially with the popularity of something like Gurren Lagann, which, like I mentioned last time, like, there are more people who know about things that reference Joe, even, like, very blatantly, than there are people who know about Joe or have read or watched it, so I do feel like it's important to kind of bring up.
Yeah, and it is also interesting because, like, I'm aware of maybe some Joe references, but not all of them. Like, I didn't know about the scene with the pigs, that was a reference.
Right.
But I would obviously know, like, the reference.
Yeah, the big spoiler one that we're not going to mention till later. Right, but it's, yeah, because that's, like, one of the more, iconic, like, probably the most iconic image from the series.
Yeah, it's mainly even just, like, the imagery. Like, when I first watched it, obviously I wouldn't have known, but once I got more into, like, anime, and, like, you see things referenced over and over again, it's like, oh, okay.
There must be another common reference point, right? And this is it. So, but no, it's a good scene. I just wanted to bring up the reference to it. Let's a little levity to this, because this is rough. So, even if the levity is from something else. All right. Oh God. We're getting to the match. I just went through a forward of it, and now Joe's, like, he's so nervous, like, Danpei's forcing to massage him so they can be relaxed for the match, and oh God, Joe versus Rikishi.
Oh.
But yeah, so, like, I like this match a lot. Like I said, it's my favorite in Joe. It's one of my favorites in things, generally speaking. Like, it's just, boy. Like, I don't know, do you have any general thoughts before we get into it, or?
Well, as someone who didn't know the spoiler of Rikishi dying, I definitely had, like, this feeling as it was going on that I was like, something's not right here. And I was like, is he gonna die? They're not gonna kill Rikishi. And then, yeah.
No. So, yeah, cool, because the way it happens is really, like, oh boy, but we'll get to that. So
yeah, because like, even when, like, the scene happens at the end where, like, they go for the handshake and he just falls down, it's like, yeah, it was a pretty grueling match. That's understandable that he would just kind of pass out. But then you look back at it later and it's like, oh.
Yeah. Well, and even, like, the way, like, Joe finds the news where the guy just comes, Rikishi's dead. Like, the words, like, it isn't given this big, it's just a small panel.
Yeah.
But the impact of that small panel is huge. Like, but,
yeah, and the way, like, they just flat out say it. Like, it's just the dialogue. It's just like, wait, no. Like, it doesn't sink in immediately. It's like, because it's that direct, you're just like, no. Did he just say that? Did that just happen?
Yeah, but, so anyway, back to the start of the match before we get to that. Like, there's the part where, like, Joe's like, okay, well, this is finally the day of our match, our long-awaited match, and Rikishi, like, smiles, and Joe feels like he's being mocked, and there's some parts later that I think add to this, but I think that Joe, like, I think Rikishi's, like, glad to be fighting Joe, and like it's not a mocking smile, it's more one of, like, pride or contentment, and Joe's just insecure, so of course he takes it very badly, but yeah, so anyway, getting to the match, Rikishi goes into his uppercuts, Joe's, like, he seems to be doing well, but then he's like he even gets some hits in, but then Rikishi gets it down, and I think there's also a point where Joe like sits down and he's like, this isn't gonna work because he's just gonna tire me out, and then I'm not gonna have a chance. Like he's just kind of out. He's basically outmatched. And then and so here, going ahead a bit, like after, because there's like a chapter or two just of the Joe trying to dodge and trying to make it like find a way, like realizing that he's outmatched. Like he even tries, he gets some hits in, but then he ends up taking more hits. And then we get to probably like again what maybe one of my favorite exchanges is in any fight ever. But yeah, Joe decides to like throw himself in there, and Rikishi so there's the part where Rikishi just hits him with an uppercut and downs him, but like the way it's like, because like we see Joe miss, and then it cuts to like the round bell, and then there's like another panel of him getting hit by the uppercut, and then we see like the corner of the ring, and then we see the follow through with the uppercut and his mouth guard flying into the air, and then some reaction shots, and like this impact, I think it like something about the way it uses the negative, because even the panels with like the negative space around the bell and the corner of the ring, and like just the fact that it's looking away from the action, like in something Yoko would do almost. Like she's a character who like earlier she like tried to run away from the match, but so it's like we're seeing this very brutal impact, but we're also kind of like made to look away from it, and like something about that makes the impact even more like powerful to me. Like this moment always struck out to me because it's just like something about how it shows less of the impact and just like stretches out the full, like it's just one punch, one uppercut across like, let me look, like two panels, but like there's 4 panels including those ones of the just seeing something else. And I just like really like how this is presented, and it's always like stuck in my mind because of like how not showing the impact makes the impact more powerful. And then after that, we get like Joe's downed. He somehow manages to get back up, and Rikishi goes in for one more uppercut that it's like like Joe's done for. And the bell rings, and Rikishi's fist stops. Like there's even a slight indentation on his glove where he's touching Joe's chin, but he stopped the punch dead, like touching Joe, like in a very obviously physically impossible. I don't understand how this is physically possible when you put so much force behind a punch and then just stop it because you heard it. Like this is the exaggerated thing I was talking about, and like I find this moment chilling because like the fact that Rikishi is so strong but has so much control that he's able to stop on a dime like this because from the bell. Like there's even the panels of Yoko and Nishi and Donpei like bracing themselves for the impact, and he just stops. It's terrifying, Mathwiz.
Yeah, and it's definitely it carries that vibe of like, when a character does something really powerful, or like I could finish you off, but I'm not going to, and it's like it's demoralizing. It completely takes the fight out of somebody, and it definitely carries that kind of like vibe.
Yeah, because like that would have been the end of the fight there, and Rikishi might have even lived, but his adherence to like, because we even see in the training he's like following the bell, like he's beating up the sandbag, but he stops when the bell rings.
Like, because the bell was like the only thing he could really like recognize in his concentration, so it does kind of make sense. As far as like fictional justification logic, but like he was so into this training thing that the bell was the only thing he would stop for, and after that so many times he's able to just like stop like that. Like,
and
he
I
has
only
that
just
much
picked
control.
up on that like literally now, but it's like those two moments, the elongated uppercut and then the stopping to the bell is probably like one of my favorite single exchanges in like any fight, because it's just like this is my 3rd time reading it, and it still just gets me like perfect, like the emotions. Like, and it's probably like a big part of the reason why I like this fight specifically so much, because it's powerful. It's just amazing how much is being shown without anything, in a sense, like in both instances. Like Rikishi's terrifying.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I just had to gush. Like, this is part of the reason I wanted to do the podcast, because I had to gush about those moments because they're so good.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a really well a well executed fight, like as far as paneling and everything. It's good.
Absolutely, yeah. So anyway, Joe tries to do a more conservative approach. He still gets wrecked. It's amazing that the man can still stand at this point, honestly. But even that fact, like, people are, oh my god, he's invincible. Like, Joe does lose, but at the same time, like, even though he's outmatched, like, it's one of those kind of fights where you respect both sides, because, like, you know, Rikishi's built up so much that the fact that Joe's able to, like, put up the fight he does is still impressive in its own right, I think. But anyway, oh no! So anyway, we get the exchange. Joe stays persistent. He hits Rikishi in the head. Rikishi loses his balance. He bounces off the rope, and he hits the rope with the back of his head.
Yeah, that's definitely something that, like, I at least have some knowledge of, because, like, with the ropes around those rings, like, normally it's not, you know, there has to be, like, a level of, like, tautness to it, like, you know, because obviously you don't want people, like, flying out of the ring. So from what I understand is it's generally like like a metal, like, it's like a metal cable that's, like, you know, wrapped within the ropes to, like, really give it that stability. So there's you know, there's a little bit of give there, but, like, it's definitely, there's a degree to which you can have it, like, too tight or too loose. And I've definitely examples I can think of, again, to think back to, like, wrestling, there was one show a couple years ago where a guy, he was supposed to be, like, thrown under the bottom rope and, like, slide to the floor, but they, like, timed it wrong, or he, like, slipped and he, like, hit his head on the rope, and he was knocked out and the match was stopped, which doesn't normally happen in pro wrestling because it's, like, kayfabe.
I've seen yeah, right, I've seen some where they, like, yeah, they just slide down. I've seen the move before, but but
there's also one from, like, decades ago where a guy named Mick Foley, he was in a match, and I think the rope had been made, like, too tight, and he got, like, whatever it is, he got caught in the rope, and, like, he was, like, being strangled by it, so he had to, like, slip out, and it tore part of his ear off. Like, so the rope, you know, you might think, like, oh, it's a rope, it shouldn't have that much resistance, but there's you know, it's a real force there. Like, even just when people will, like, run the ropes in wrestling, you know, again, like, I've seen videos, like, of a guy who, you know, like, a guy who interviews wrestlers. He went to, like, a wrestling training school, and even just when he, like, bounced off the rope, he's like, I'm like wincing and, like, holding his back, because, like, there's a real, it's not quite as much as, like, hitting a metal bar, because there is some give there, but it's still not good.
Because, like, the way you see the wrestlers bounce off those, you know, that
they do it. It's such an like an effortless thing. You don't think anything of it.
Like, yeah, it's like, you know, that seems like, you know, because we've experienced, like, swings or like things like that are on, you know, like something with give to it like that. Like, I'd think, like, yeah, it'd be like that. But no, that's helpful knowledge to me, because even just looking at, like, from what I know is, like, even if it was more of like because I actually done mountain climbing, for example. That's kind of bungee ropes. That's kind of what I was thinking of with or like that kind of rope is what I was imagining. I was way off, apparently.
Well, yeah, like, I don't know how long, how far back, like, the whole metal cable thing, like,
they might have been a different material in this year. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but still, like, there's, it's because, like, not something you want to bang your head off.
It's a rope. It's also just narrower. So the fact that he's hitting, like, this narrow surface, like, it's the pressure would be higher than compared to a punch, you know. So even if there's more force behind a punch, it's a wider surface, so more surface area means less impact damage, where this is a very narrow surface, so... right, and...
Yeah, so definitely I have that context where it's like, you see him hit the rope, and it's like, that's not good. Like, he could... When he gets up, and when he gets up, and they talk about him having, like, the punch drunk symptoms, it's like, yeah, that's concussion city. He's probably... Oh, and then, of course...
Yeah, you even said earlier, like, when you were reading it, you were like, something's wrong here, and this is where that would have definitely said in if it hadn't already.
Yeah, and especially when he gets up, and it's, like, the ominous aura, and he, like, drops his guard, and it's like, oh, fuck, that's not good.
Yeah, they did the no guard stance, and it kind of creates this, like, aura, like, this... The no guard stance is also kind of interesting in regards to, like, the Tomorrow theme, because, like, it forces, like... You know, it forces the opponent to sort of, like, contend with their fear of the tomorrow in a sense, because if you go after someone with the North Guard stance, you're gonna get hit, like boxing, you know. So like, and then there's the mention of like the time and points and stuff. So like Joe's like, okay, yeah, they're just gonna stand there. Like they stand there for like a whole round. They're just watching each other, waiting for the other person to move. But someone has to move. Yeah,
and everybody in the crowd is like, well, you call this a boxing match? But it's just like that kind of like Mexican standoff thing where it's like whoever makes the first move
loses. And then Joe is the one who's the most gripped by his fear of tomorrow, and he's the one who moves in action first, and Rikishi wins. Because, like, I think the mention of points comes up, and Joe's like, shit, if I don't do anything, I'll lose. So he gambles on that chance, but he gets defeated. Or what were you going to say?
A detail that I had been curious about after the fact, but I never went back to read the chapters. Does Rikishi have any dialogue after he gets up and does the no guard stance?
Give me a couple seconds to look through.
Because I had once I knew that he dies, I'm like, It was just something that like I thought of. I was like, does he speak? I don't remember, but it would seem like definitely one of those like indicators. Looking back in retrospect,
after he gets up, he does say that I'm fine. I can still fight. I'm gonna look if he said anything else.
Because it definitely, it's very much like the with his whole training up to this point, he just becomes like a pure fighting machine. So it's definitely, and again, like there are like with my wrestling knowledge, I've heard stories of like people getting like a concussion at like the start of a match and just like on autopilot, just going 8, 10 minutes, 20 minutes in finishing the match, having no memory of anything, but like their body had the muscle memory to finish what they were doing, even if they get like knocked out from a concussion, like at the start, like at the very beginning. And so like, with Rikishi still kind of going on, especially if he had no dialogue, like I just thought that would be a nice touch if that was the case, but it wasn't something I paid attention to because I didn't think of.
I mean, you don't have to be conscious to say some things. Well, first I'll say like just the idea of like blacking out during the match and not remembering stuff. Like I just want to say that's happened in Ippo. I don't remember it happening in Joe, but that has happened in Ippo, this other boxing series that I've been going through recently. And my brother, so like, he'll commonly like this has nothing to do with sports or anything, but it's an interesting like anecdote. I think that is maybe relevant. So like, because he often falls asleep in the afternoon, so we've had to wake him up to come to eat dinner, and he says like I'm coming or something like that, or it's like and sometimes he'll literally say that, but he won't have woken up at all. And apparently at his friend's house, he's been falling asleep, and he'll just like randomly say I'm coming or something like that. Or like I heard you, or like he's like he's
like
being
it's a
woken up
routine
for dinner, right. So it's like saying you're able to fight, like I don't know, maybe that's not common enough for Rikishi for that to happen, but like saying responding to things while not being fully conscious.
Well, like when you're in like the boxing environment and it's like no, I have to keep fighting, and like again like a fighting machine. Like if you're kind of tuned to thinking that, it makes that it's definitely like. It has basis in reality that if he would get up and be like, no, I'm good, I can, even despite not being conscious.
Though there are some other, like he has some laughs, or like he goes, hey. So he does seem conscious. Like interesting idea. Like but he does seem conscious during the whole thing. Oh, and after he knocks down Joe, he says it's over. So okay.
That's me reading a little too much into it, but that would have been cool.
It would have been cool. Like, and I even had some possible reasons as to add to that. But now looking further, now it doesn't seem to be the case. But that would be interesting to see that. But yeah. Oh, and even and then it's over when that imagery when he beats Joe and he's just hanging over him.
He really does. He seems just like a ghost. Like, I mean, with his figure where he's slimmed down and everything, and he's just the bones and the look on his face where it's just like the smile, and it's haunting. Especially like after the fact. Like at the time of reading it, I'm just like, wow, this is a really striking panel. And then after the fact, I'm like, ooh. Yeah. Especially when you consider that he shows up later as like a specter haunting Joe. Yeah.
Oh God! Oh man! There's this other part that always gets me because like after Rikishi wins, there's a bunch of people throwing stuff into the ring out of the crowd just loses it basically. And
you're right.
It's just a little orange that bops off of Rikishi's head, and I'm just like, he doesn't need any more pits. Make it stop.
No.
Make it stop. Like it probably didn't make any meaningful difference, but the fact that I like. It hit his head.
Yeah.
Like after this, like I just can't like shake that. It's just a little tangerine, but like.
Yeah, or I could definitely see that being just like a little bit of you go back to it, and it's like, oh, the foreshadowing. Yeah, it's like even just another little tiny thing that like calls attention to the reveal.
Yeah. But anyway, Joe, he wasn't able to get up in time. So he failed the match. But when he does get up, he goes over to shake Rikishi's hand because he does have a lot of animosity toward Rikishi, like at the start of the match, or I'll kill you, as he said in Juvie. But he also does like respect him a lot, and he's like,
he admits defeat. So like the arrogant Joe who is so goes out of his way to hide his emotions, and he brags all the time even though he's insecure, and he's like, I admit defeat, you beat me, you're the better man. And it's like,
and I think this is his like first, like, because so he had a draw against Rikishi in Juvie, and I think he's won every other fight since, like, or it was otherwise inconclusive. Like, this is his first major loss. Like he did get beat in some street balls, like I think Dampé beat him up a couple, like, to send him to, or so he could be sent to, or not, the facility before Juvie, like,
but as far as like an official match,
yes, like a full-on fight, like this is his first major loss, and he, like you said, even though he's so insecure, he readily accepted his defeat, but Rikishi wasn't able to give him the handshake and collapsed.
And that was it for Rikishi.
Because it's just like, so anyway, they go to the waiting room. Joe says, like, he was so glad that he could fight him, and or like I was even after being knocked out several times, he could keep go on and fight him. Like, I was lucky. And then they come in, they're like, we don't leave the Dampé's like, leave the loser. Isn't it just common practice to just leave the one who lost in silence? And Rikishi's dead.
Like the fact that it's just there, and then like the pages afterwards where it's just like silence and it's just like characters. Just the way it it syncs in with the characters as it syncs in with the audience, and then it ends with Joe losing his shit and getting like full one really big panel and then a full page of just like screaming in complete grief and like oh god. And it's like the suddenness of it too, like it's immediately after the fact that it's just like, man, we just had this really conclusive fight. It's very cathartic. We finally got that long anticipated match between Joe and Rikishi, and so there's definitely like that was satisfying. And then it's like dead. That's it. God. And so definitely from like Joe's perspective being there, and it's like after that, it's like it's one of those things where like you wouldn't believe it. It's like, did he just say that? I really like how it's handled.
Yeah, and then they go to Rikishi's room, and Yoko's just destroyed. Like, she's slumped against the wall, like, and it's just no dialogue after they get in, and until Dampé starts speaking, and it's just.
And of course it's a lot of characters saying like, oh, it's my fault that I did this, or Joe later will be like, I'm the one who killed him. This, that, and everything else. So there's a lot of like, I don't know, definitely it handles the grieving process, and like the mental hang-ups of it very well. Yeah,
and they do explain, like, oh, there was a similar incident where this happened, but Rikishi was in a worse state, so he died sooner, where the other person was in a coma for a few days. And then, well, the interesting part, or an interesting part rather, is because you'll notice that like, well, this is why when I go back to earlier where I say like at the start of the fight he was glad to be fighting Joe, and even here like when Joe takes off the towel on his face, Rikishi's smiling in death, like he was satisfied with the fight. So which is why I say like he was, because the smile also reminds me of the one that he had before the match. So he was just like he was glad to be fighting Joe, but now he's dead. So. And like you said, everyone's blaming themselves. Yoko's, I should have stopped this match. Joe is obviously the one who kept fighting and put him in this state. Well, Rikishi, of course, was that, he was the one. Like, there's lots of factors in play. It's not just like one person's fault. But there's room for everyone to sort of blame themselves for complicity.
Yeah, but you do kind of get I think it's the grandfather who says that, like, at the end of the day, this is what Rikishi wanted. Like, all the things that led to this point, it was what he wanted. And so, I don't know. It's like a little bit of like, no one's really to blame. Yeah.
Yeah. He died. He beat his greatest rival and passed away satisfied. Like, that's what the expression on his face is. Satisfaction. Like, Anyway,
yeah, I was gonna say, thinking at this point, like if Yoko's not my favorite character, then it's definitely Rikishi, because he just has such that presence.
No, yeah, and Rikishi I definitely like, though I also like what he offers for Joe's character, even in just like the next volume where we still have to discuss. Like after that, I'm like, damn, I'm a little emotionally drained. Oh shit, we have another volume. But anyway, cut to a little while later, Rikishi gets his funeral. The media goes to see Joe, who appears to be completely oblivious, like he's just playing with the kids. Until they start, like, they even, like, go away, like, man, Yabuki's one cold-hearted monster. But then we see, like, once they start playing house, and Joe's handed food, he's reminded of Rikishi, and he immediately goes quiet, and...
Yeah, reading that part, when the reporter people are just like, wow, look at him, he doesn't have a care in the world, I'm just like, fuck you, people grieve in whatever way they need to, fuck you.
Yeah, like, sometimes, like, escaping is part of the coping process. Like, it's, just, a moment of respite isn't, or respite, I don't know how to pronounce the word, whatever. Hopefully you know the word I'm talking about. But, a moment of relief from that doesn't mean he's not feeling anything. And sure enough, once something that even remotely reminds him of Rikishi, he's dipped back into that grief, and everyone just leaves because, let him alone, because and of course he goes back to the gym, he boxes a bit, he's still very like he basically killed someone, like, of course there's more to it than that, but like, from his mindset, like,
I mean, yeah, like he was the one who dealt the blow, and even if it's like it's obviously a very specific case of like killing somebody, it's not something that was like premeditated or anything, it was an accident. So yeah, like he definitely has like the guilt, the like these hands were the ones these hands took Rikishi's life away. That was the quote.
Yeah, and they even bring up other boxers like what 9 in 10 boxers who take part in an accident like this don't return to the ring. So it's like, so there's the question of, is Joe going to come back? Which, as a reader, like, obviously, because, like, it's called Tomorrow's Joe, not Tomorrow's Nishi. As good as Nishi is, like, he's not the main character. Anyway, then we get Danpei and Nishi come back to see, Noriko comes in first, actually, and just leaves some food. But then Danpei and Nishi come back, and... they talk for a bit before, like, they see that Joe has been punching the sandbag for ages, considering it's covered in blood. Like, he's just, Joe's, he's still, like, being Joe and covering up his emotions, but, like, there's also a level at which he can't hide it. And then he goes to the park and he reminisces, like, we see flashbacks to his first meeting with Rikishi with the pigs.
Yeah, this was one of those moments where it felt kind of like, in a long-running manga when they do kind of the recap moments, and it's like, this is how far we've come. Especially like, I don't know what the audience would have been like for Joe at the time, but definitely like if there's anybody who started reading this in the middle of like its serialization and who might not have been familiar with those events, it's kind of, it's a very organic way of kind of bringing that in.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, Joe's feeling like something's wrong with him because, like, even though he hated Rikishi so much, now he wants to see him more than anyone in the world. And he's like, he doesn't understand, because, he's never cared about a lot of people before, and so he's now, like, I guess he's never had anything to lose. Like, he never had a family or friends before this, and now he's not only, like, found, a rival, a comrade in a sense, like someone who understood him and vice versa, but now, like, that person is gone. So he's never had to deal with this kind of loss before, and he's trying to grieve alone, but, like, the part, because, like, Danpei and Nishi are like, we're here for you, and then everyone's worried for you. Like, the whole community that's been supporting Joe comes to him, and he just, like, he runs. He rejects it. Like, he can't, he's, part of it is that, like, yeah, he's not a character who wants to show his weakness, so, like, he can't, like, bottle it up, and, like, it has to go out, but also, like, he can't be weak in front of other people still. Like, he's, so his only option is to run away. Anyway, he ends up running to an old stall where some other people drag him there, rather, and he gets a drink, and he like he does get into a fight over it and ends up in the trash. Like he's like he even though he's like boxing is what he does, well, so you might not have noticed this because obviously it's foreshadowing for something you wouldn't have caught on, but like when he punches, it goes like really wide, and you maybe in the moment you might have been like, oh, he's tired or like something like that, but it's his I feel like part of it is also like his aversion to hitting people in the head because you know, like he's you know, like he's even surprised when he gets hit back because you know, obviously like you know, he as a boxer he's already like he's losing it because of his trauma hitting Rikishi. So, you know, he shouldn't be losing a street fight, especially when boxers, like, you know, they're not supposed to be fighting in, you know, casually because they're so dangerous. But Joe he misses his punch and then he ends up in the trash. We get a little note from the narrator who's asking if he'll be able to stand up again after. Like, there's will you let your friend Rikiishi Tooru's death go to waste and part 1 end, which I think this is only part 1 and part 2. But I kind of forget about this division, honestly, because it's relatively small compared to, like, you know, Naruto part 1 and part 2, where there's a giant time skip and redesigns and stuff.
Oh, no, is part 2 gonna go to shit as well? I like part 1 better.
Peaked at Soul Rikishi, I don't know. Man, I can't believe Ashita Joe abandoned its theme of hard work beats talent. I don't know. Oh yeah, I guess if Joe's the hard work and Rikishi's the talented one, then I guess it did, huh? Anyway, we cut to a random boxing match, and they give a brief moment of silence for Rikishi, who people in the crowd have kind of forgotten, which is commented on.
Yeah, that's definitely. I don't know. I wonder if like this doesn't also. I kind of got the feeling that, as well as like with the way that the media is kind of like, there's like a mixed portrayal because Joe is able to kind of manipulate the story to get into the boxing world, and he's like this big personality that a lot of people can rally behind. I thought at one point there had been like a mention, like just in the background of like how boxing, you know, before it didn't used to be televised and things were different, but now that things are televised and there's about like these personalities and stuff, like that was part of why Dampé couldn't really, you know, it was another part of it was just a minor reason why they didn't want him to become a coach again. But I definitely kind of get this feeling that as well as like showing the not glorifying, but also not like condemning boxing, there's also like a degree of commentary on how, you know, the introduction of television and like marketing and whatnot has kind of changed the mentality around boxing. Because yeah, like for a superstar like Rikishi, one of the, you know, he was up there with Joe as far, you know, their match had like I think it's even said that their match had like the reception of like a world title match. Like it was that popular. The two people were that.
Yeah, right. Because, you know,
how
Joe's
quickly
this loudmouth, Rikishi's this talent, like.
Yeah, but then how quickly the business can kind of move on from that. Right. Whereas if it was, I guess, more like grassroots, people who are in it are really like into it and they know the people. So there'd be more of like a smaller community. So there would be more like, not knowledge, but what's the word? Reverence? I don't know.
Or no.
I can't quite think of the word I'm going for. But you know, like when things are.
Yeah, I think. But
yeah, like when something's smaller, it's like, oh yeah, people were really behind it. And then when it gets bigger and it's spread to more people who don't know it as well, then it's like, oh, it's lost its, you know, that kind of, I don't know. It's basically just the things were good before it became popular.
That's funny. Though I guess I bring it down to like, though it's also like, you know, he was much closer to like the rest of the world has moved on. Like it's going towards a tomorrow, but it's also maybe, you know.
Oh yeah, I guess that's also kind of true.
Much, where like obviously with Yoko, especially Yoko and Joe, they're still very much trapped by that yesterday because, you know, Rikishi meant so much to them, relatively speaking, that they can't just move on so easily. Where like he was a big famous boxer that people liked watching, but there are other boxers, you know. So they, you know, so there's the gap isn't as big, you know. It's just and also with Yabuki fading out, like that would make it even less relevant because it's like if Yabuki stayed in the public conscious, then that would have helped Rikishi stick along a little longer. But
yeah,
that didn't happen, so you know it'll just fade away. Like whatever happened to Yabuki and Rikishi? You know, oh, okay, yeah, that's right. They're doing it in silence for that. Okay,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's kind of a bit like a pro and con thing because, again, like you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, about like, the sport will move on for tomorrow. And so it's like no matter how big of a talent you are, eventually the sport will continue to move on without you. And that's just the case for anything, whether it's like somebody dying or somebody just, getting old age and retiring and that sort of thing. Because like the sport moves beyond Wolf Kaneguchi too, when he retired. So it's definitely like that pushing for tomorrow, kind of baked into it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so we see the gym. They're wondering where Joe is. To the point where like Danpei's asking, like the media comes in, and it's like, what do you guys know about Joe? And they're like, okay, can you put in an ad in the newspaper, tell him to come back? And yeah, he's just gone. And they talk about and as they talk about the unlikeliness of him being able to return as a boxer, Joe's like, I'm right here. But because he was he was tight, and he talks about how he got beaten up basically. But Joe's given up on boxing because if he can't win a street fight, then what chance does he have in the ring? And yeah, he has a spat with Nishi, who's like, Nishi's trying to tell him to, go forward, but Joe retorts with like, well, you can't, I'm not going to take that from someone who can't even go a night without his noodles. And, they fight for a bit, and Joe's just like, well, so I will say like, yeah, Joe definitely punches Nishi in the head here. So, maybe it was accidental foreshadowing earlier, or maybe it was like, I don't know. But I don't know. Yeah, but I did think of it earlier, so I thought I'd bring it up anyway, even though it might, like I said, might have been more accidental. But I don't know, Joe's just obviously hurting this whole sequence, and it's like, I don't know, like, and yeah, that is one thing I like about Joe is like, again, how it doesn't shy away from the darkness. And here we have like yeah, it's basically a whole like volume arc of like that's still ongoing, even of Joe overcoming the death, the trauma of having like killed someone in the ring.
Yeah.
But yeah, the media does find him, and which we already kind of talked about a bit, and yeah, like they want, they're under the guise of helping him. They take him to the nightclub the club that Yoko is in. Of course, Joe sees her, and they end up having a conversation. Yoko says some things like, she's like, "Oh, Rikishi died a fool's death." To think he'd go, because she's disappointed in Joe, because she's like, "Oh, to think like Rikishi or I thought you were a man with some spine," and to think that Rikishi would put himself through hell just to fight you, like, I wonder if she's like her way of coping with death, like, yeah, she's doing the dancing to kind of like put it outside of her mind, and now she's like trying to like diminish what happened as if it wasn't important to her almost, which Joe takes like almost at face value, and he's like, Rikishi died, so there goes your hobby, you can drop dead, like, when obviously she's not actually that callous, she definitely cares. But she's definitely trying to put up this face that she doesn't, like trying to convince herself almost, is how I took it.
Yeah. But there is also kind of a nugget in there that like, okay, well, I guess this is less of like the more optimistic spin on it, but it's more of like, like, oh, Rikishi died, so you could quit or that sort of thing. Like, there's definitely more of like, you can still like carry on his legacy by continuing to, to pick yourself up and continue pushing for tomorrow, because like, is that what Rikishi would have wanted, for Joe to just stop boxing?
Right.
Even if she doesn't express that in the most like optimistic, correct way.
Yeah, because in a way, like, because like not only did Rikishi beat Joe, but he also died. So Joe can never surpass Rikishi, basically.
Yeah.
Like, even if he becomes the world champ, he can't surpass Rikishi. But also if he does, then in a way, like, that he almost takes Rikishi there in a sense, you could say, because of that. So but so in a way, yeah, by giving up, he's like I don't know, yeah. He's almost like, it doesn't necessarily respect his legacy, because Rikishi suffered so much for boxing, but Joe is running from boxing now, like because he's afraid of it, because of that trauma and that grief that he hasn't gotten over.
And I do think that is also interesting. You mentioned Joe not being able to ever surpass Rikishi because he lost and then Rikishi died, which I think is really interesting from like a rivalry perspective, because thinking of how many other stories where it's like, oh, we end with the big climactic fight between rivals or whatever, and like it leads to like eventually the hero will come out on top, but that's never going to happen with Joe because his rival's dead. So
usually the rivals are, you're right, they're these things that stay throughout the whole series, but in this case,
in a way,
he's
still kind of sticking around in a different way because Joe will never be able to surpass him. That he's always going to be in Rikishi's shadow, and so even as the story moves on, with Rikishi no longer present, he's still present in that way.
Right. Because like I said, his shadow does remain throughout in later encounters and later matches and stuff, but we'll talk about that, of course, as we get to it. Yoko even tells Joe that he needs to live in the ring for the sake of Wolf and Rikishi, and if he doesn't, then neither those two or I will forgive you. But he still continues to run away for the time being. And then, speaking of Wolf, so we get to see Wolf has fallen out of the world of boxing, but he's still fighting, and so we see that he's fallen in with gangsters, basically, and he's their muscle as a former, pro boxer. And I think you mentioned it earlier, but generally speaking, before we're getting ahead to Wolf fighting the other gangster guy, the with the hat. But what did you generally think about Wolf's return? Because I definitely think it's really good. But
I mean, yeah, the fact that he is now working for this mafia group. I definitely liked the whole bit of him talking about oh, I would have been so good if it wasn't just for this, this bad luck. I would, if I really could have, I had this close fight with Joe, the man who killed Rikishi, but, if my jaw just hadn't broken, I really could have done this. And it's a lot of, I could have done this, I could have done this. It's a lot of living in the past, which is the thematic contrast against
he's
striving for tomorrow.
He's running from boxing like Joe is, and he's obsessed with his yesterday because that's the only moment he had in the limelight. That's the only moment where he was the person he wanted to be. Now he's being something else, but he can't let go of that. And he's like, man, I had it so good, but Joe, he's just this little pebble. He's not that great. He just ruined my career. He's still a piece of shit, but he's also Joe's also how I kind of see it is Joe sees Wolf and he's seeing this echo of what he could be, because Joe's also kind of an evil wolf in a sense. And
and he's stuck in his past, but for him the past is Rikishi's death. He can't move on from that.
Right.
So I definitely see that as Wolf being the logical sort of endpoint for Joe.
Right. Well, because he even said before when if Danpei can't get his gym license, then I might have to become a crime boss. And this would have been his first step on that road, because he's also really, because Joe would be a great fit for that, because not only can he fight, but he's also just really cunning, and he's got lots of street smarts. We see his schemes back in chapter 1. If he never became a boxer, he would have been a scary crime boss, I think. Not an evil one. He definitely has a heart. Even in those early chapters, he wasn't, he didn't take kindly to Danpei getting beaten up on by gangsters. But
he would have been a good Yakuza guy. Thinking of the weird, complicated stuff that the Yakuza tend to be associated with.
Yeah, it's
where there's definitely a lot of negativity, but there's also anyway, sorry, that's going off on a tangent, I guess.
No, that's fair. But no, Joe, you're right. Joe would be a kind of a fit for that in this sort of a crime in a crime group that there's a whole game series on the Yakuza where you play as so they're not negative, they're not viewed entirely negatively, even though they are a crime group. Which I don't know a lot about, so I'm not going to make any bold statements regarding if it's a problem or not. But Joe would kind of be a fit for that, and seeing Wolf in that spot is or go on.
I'm sorry, I'm continuing to go off on that tangent, but I'm even thinking of I forget his name, but the character from Rakugo Shinju, who he's looked down on because he was a member of the Yakuza at one point, and he has to work to get over that. So there's definitely it's not the correct.
Right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely, I definitely as far as for Wolf, it's kind of when you it's another sense of when you have nowhere else to go, that's a place where you can end up. And so for Joe, he ended up with boxing, and it was a way to kind of use it constructively. But this is a different path he could have gone down had that not been there.
Yes, so and it is kind of what pushes Joe back into boxing, because he sees what he threatened to be if he didn't have boxing, And he's like, no, I don't want to be that. Like, and he's, and what I do like is even though Wolf is like a giant piece of shit, like, because he fights the what's his name,
Gondo.
I think it's Gondo. Oh yeah, it's Gondo. And he immediately gets like hit in the chin, and he's like he's paralyzed basically, and Gondo just like fucking just destroys him, and like even when Joe steps in, like he steps in and he tells get him to the hospital, get Wolf to the hospital so he can use his jaw again, like even though he was like Wolf's like a piece of shit who beat up children and was just shitting on Joe, he's still like. Joe still has like something of a heart to him regarding like just get him to safety, like, or get him to a hospital, like make sure so he doesn't and then he has his exchange with Gondo, and like even he's like shitting on Wolf, and Joe's like again like he's seeing himself in Wolf, so he retaliates and he punches Gondo, and he's like, oh, like because he was like Wolf's not a boxer anymore, he's not looking for his tomorrow, so his punches aren't strong, but when Joe punches Gondo, he's like, yeah, that's the fist of a boxer, and he's taken out immediately.
Well, yeah, and he doesn't hit him in the face; he hits him in the stomach.
right. Which, as we see later with the Nishi, that's like at this point, like again, I don't know if this was planned, like because he did hit Nishi in the face, but other than that, like so that's one weird inconsistency, unless maybe I don't know, well, because maybe not, I don't know. So like one thing I'm aware of regarding trauma is that like. It takes like I've heard that the best way to avoid trauma is by in general like re-experiencing the thing in some like lighter fashion what made you like what gave you the trauma.
Well, it's a kind of like overcome it, you're saying,
right? And I've also heard that it's like it's more effective the earlier it happens. So it's possible that like. The trauma didn't set in as well until after he hit Nishi, or maybe that's a bit convenient because I don't know. But it's just something I thought of because, like, mostly again I'm thinking of Space Brothers, where a character had a traumatic incident in a spacesuit, and like he was being told by someone who was training him to overcome it is like, oh well, they should have just sent put you right back in that in a safe part of that situation again so that you could overcome it. But it's been too long, so we'll have to like ease you into it. And so, like, the training was to, like, just gradually, like, increase, like, getting closer to being wearing a spacesuit, like, starting out with just, like, glasses, and then just until it got close enough to being in a spacesuit that it triggered his trauma again, and then they could go from there and work on improve helping him move past it, basically. But, like, so, so, I don't know. But Joe already hit Nishi, so I don't know. Maybe that kind of contradicts it, too. But, oh, well. I wonder if the anime changed that, actually, and made it so he didn't hit Nishi in the face, or... But I don't know, because that would have been something maybe with hindsight they would have like recognized, hey, that's kind of weird. So, but anyway, Joe, he gets caught up with the police, but because he was fighting against gangsters, and like fighting protecting a Wolf, then they let him off easily, and so Danpei is able to take him out, and he sees Nishi and assumes it's Rikishi, out of just like. Again, like he's even framed like kind of like a ghost with the way he's like standing in the shadows.
This is another one of those things where like the character design does change a bit, and like the hairstyle changes, and it does look very similar to Rikishi's. So it's like again like the art kind of playing with that.
Yeah, like mostly the hair and like the eyes especially, but like once you get the nose and jaw, it's obviously very clearly not Rikishi, but it's right. But anyway, they get him back. Everyone's happy because, like, Joe, we missed you. Like, he is a part of this community now. And he, even though he ran from it because, he wasn't comfortable enough to show his weakness there, like, they still accept him. And, he's back. He's ready to box again. Well, in spirit, maybe not, like, all the way. Because, like, he gets into his little sparring match with or no, wait, that's a little later. I think. Or maybe... Oh, no, never mind. Yeah, he just goes over what happened, and yeah, he's ready for his comeback. He jumps in the ring with Nishi.
Yeah, I did really like the line where Danpei asks him, like, how far will you fall? And Joe's like, I've fallen far enough.
Yes, that's right. And, and then everyone's happy. It's time for a comeback, right? And then, of course, yeah, he's able to get Nishi with a body blow. And I like Nishi's beating him up on first, and Joe's like letting it happen because he's like, he just I want to knock away all these negative emotions I'm feeling, just to kind of like, get his senses knocked into him basically. And then he does finally retaliate and take Nishi down with a body blow. And at first it's like, yeah, he's back. He's got his punch. But then Nishi's like, uh-oh. Yeah, I don't think he can go for the head anymore. And then Danpei's like, well, if that's true, that's his downfall as a boxer, leaving a nice old cliffhanger. And which is why I thought it was a good way to end off, because like he's overcome some of Rikishi's death, but like the shadow still kind of lingers.
Yeah.
So yeah, good stuff. Like I just like, yeah, the characterization, there's a few like, like it's the well, some of it, like the designs of the kids not changing. It's like, but like overall, it's just like really good stuff, I think. And I just like the characters and the exploration and the conflicts. And it chose a good manga. Did you want to give any more general thoughts now that we've finished the discussion, or for this stretch?
It's good. I definitely would understand if like Rikishi Joe was the high point, because it's like a lot. But I'm definitely excited to see where things go from here.
Oh, like I definitely think it's still really like strong going for, like, I think I said earlier, like, I think this is where Joe starts for me, like where I start like really liking it. But it doesn't stop. It's just like, it peaks here, but there's some other like high peaks that, get close to it. But it's just like there's some specific things here that just really like gel with me.
Well, yeah, because like even if it peaks here, that doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, it went downhill. So yeah, exactly. Like I definitely have high hopes going forward.
And yeah, overall, I think the conflict is, it's really strong. Like the series, like, it's tomorrow's Joe, like it's in the title, so it definitely grasps its idea really well. So anyway, next time we'll be reading. So we just finished volume 9 in this time. So start from volume 10 and then read to volume 14, page 81. This is the last time we'll have a split volume thing like this. Because the one after that's going to be the last one. So you just read from volume 14, page 82 to the ending, which will be our longest reading. So alongside like the characters and arc ranking stuff, it'll probably be our longest discussion. But I still think the way that I divided it was pretty good. So, but anyway, yeah, thank you for listening. And speaking of arc rankings, I have no idea how I'm going to divide up the arcs, because it's not really like structured like a shonen series in the same way, like it's not like oh, the Chunin exams arc, it's not quite like that, I don't know, so I'll figure, like right now I have Juvie as an arc, which is just like the first like 5 volumes, like last reading basically. But I don't know, is this 2 arcs with Wolf and Rikishi, or I don't know yet. I'll figure it out later.
Well, yeah, because even then you could break it up Juvie into like, okay, versus Rikishi versus Aoyama, sort of.
Right, like there's little matches in there, so it's like, yeah, it's not really structured. Like an arc is like generally like one conflict with an antagonist usually, and then even those will be divided into sagas where like Jaya and Skypia are both arcs, but they're also like still thematically connected in ways that like that the saga helps to connect them. But and then even though what about like there's Wolf, and then there's Rikishi, and then there's like the overcoming the grief of Rikishi, which we could say goes into next. I'll figure it out, like I said, when we read more. We'll manage. Maybe we won't do an arc ranking, but we'll just like, because I guess for a sports series, like because it focuses more on the matches than the arcs, so to speak, then maybe just by saying like our favorite fights, we'll also kind of get not an arc ranking, but like at least like these are ones that we liked. So I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, like I said, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.